All right, it's 3:45, so we'll go ahead and give just a few more seconds here to let people trickle in. We've got about 100 people, so thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you had a great Wednesday, whatever you are doing today. We are excited to share some hopefully very helpful and informative information about how to make a revision to your 24-25 budget. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Just to let you know, we'll be using the Q&A feature in Zoom here for you to be able to submit questions. So you should be able to see that at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button. Anytime that you have a question that comes to mind, feel free to type that in and it will go through to our team. And we'll take pauses throughout the webinar to address some of those questions. We'll read them out loud and share answers. Some of them will also be answered directly just through messaging. And then we'll have another opportunity for Q&A at the end of the webinar for any questions that were not addressed. Also, for any unrelated questions, so for questions that are not related directly to budget revisions, we listed our emails here on the screen. Anything that is programmatic can be sent to cpaacademies@cde.ca.gov. And for fiscal related questions, please email cpafiscal@cde.ca.gov. And then any questions related to KPAR, which is what we'll be using today for this, you can go ahead and email kpar@cde.ca.gov. So I'll leave that there for a moment. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll kick things off with introductions. We'll then jump in and talk about the CPA grant timeline. The bulk of today's webinar will be spent looking at the budget revision submission tool. And then we'll share some upcoming webinars and information sessions that we have on the calendar. And as I said at the end, we'll take time for questions and answers. So my name is Kainwen Bushy, and I'm an education programs assistant here at the CDE. And my role is really to support CPAs throughout the state. So you may have interacted with me through email. I may have met with you online through a Zoom call. And I really look forward to attending Educating for Careers, where hopefully I'll get to meet a lot of you in person, see you face to face. I'll go ahead and pass things off to my team. Elise, would you like to jump in and introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you. Again, Elise Rulifson. I'm an education programs consultant supporting the CPAs. I've met many of you, and thank you so much for making the time to be here and learn about how the exciting way we're going to be starting to submit budget revisions moving forward. Should I pass it to Cindy?
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Rose, and I work with the Green Technology Partnership Academies, and I've worked on the program for many years, so a lot of people already know me. If you have any questions, please email cpafiscal@cde.ca.gov. Thank you.
Alicia?
Hi, I'm Alicia Geary, an analyst here with this group, and I do the CTEI funded ones, and I second what Cindy said. If you have any questions, please do write to us at cpafiscal@cde.ca.gov. Thanks.
Thank you, Alicia. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Upton. I'm an AGPA with the CPA program. I don't know what else to say.
And Michelle handles all the Prop 98 funding. So if you have any questions, if you are funded through Prop 98, you can reach out to her as well through CPA Fiscal.
I'm a little rattled since
That's all right. And then Isabel, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Hello, everybody. I'm Isabel. I am the office technician, and I help support the CPA team doing the background stuff. And I also update our CPA web pages.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So this is our wonderful team. We're here to support you. And let's go ahead and jump into today's session. So this here is a table that is an overview of both of the active grants right now. So we have the 2023-25 grant, as well as the 24-25 one-year grant. Both of these grant periods end June 30th of this year. You've already completed your proposed budget for both of these, so you can check that off the list. The next thing to come up will be the KPAR annual report for the 24-25 grant. And so that will be due June 30th, and that will be completed digitally in KPAR. And then the other thing to mark on your calendar is the end of project expenditure report for both of these grants is due the same day, August 29th, 2025. The difference being that the 23-25 grant report will be done on paper, like it has been in previous years. The 24-25 one-year grant will be done digitally in KPAR. And we will be providing webinars on these topics in the upcoming months. A couple more things to keep in mind is that with this grant, the current 24-25 annual grant, budget revisions, which is the topic of today, will be completed in KPAR digitally. Any revisions to your budget for the 23-25 budget, however, will be done on paper. So just keep in mind the paper is for the 23-25 grant. All right, so let's talk about when you would need to request a budget revision. Okay. So a budget revision is only going to be required if you plan to transfer more than 20% of your total CPA grant funds from one object code in your budget to another object code. Or if you move more than 20% of your total grant funds from one object code to multiple object codes. So for example, if your Academy's 2024-25 allocation is $81,000, so you're fully funded, you have $81,000, you would only need to do a budget revision if you plan to transfer more than 20% of that, which would be $16,200, into another object code, right? From one object code to another, or from one object code to multiple object codes. So I know that might sound a little confusing. We have lots of examples to walk you through today. And again, we will be sharing these slides as well as recording this webinar to share out with you. We'll let you know the details of that. It will either be posted to our website or sent through our listserv, but we will get this out to you so you don't have to memorize all of this. All right, so when you do not need to do a budget revision, just to reiterate, is if you are transferring 20% or less of your total CPA grant funds between object codes, so from one object code to another, or from one object code to multiple, you do not need to do a budget revision. So we're really just talking about more than 20% of your total CPA grant funds being moved. If you don't move more than 20%, then this will just be reported on your annual end of project expenditure report. So that's how you will let us know how you spent your funds. And another key piece of information is that budget revisions need to be approved by our CDE CPA team before you start your end of project expenditure report. So before you start that, these revisions need to be approved and completed so that you can do your final report. If you suspect that you need to do a budget revision, we are asking that you please email CPA Fiscal. And we just want to make sure that you do indeed need to do a revision. So you might think that you do, but actually maybe it turns out you don't because you're not moving more than 20%. So we want to help you with this process and ensure that you're not wasting your valuable time with a revision that isn't necessary. So if you think that you need to make a revision, please start by emailing us the grant period that you're working with, a brief description of the new purchase or purchases you plan to make, and the cost of those purchases. And then please tell us the original object code and the new object code or codes for the transfer of these funds. And just keep in mind, again, these budget revisions are going to be extremely uncommon due to this 20% minimum requirement. So it's unlikely that you'll be doing a budget revision However, it is possible, and we do receive a few of them each year. So before I move on to give you an example, I'm going to pause for a moment and just check in. Elise, are there any questions that have come through so far?
Yes, so the first question came and asked from Jason, is a budget revision required for last year's funds of more than 20, and if it meets the 20%? The answer is yes. However, to submit a revision for the 23-25 grant last year, last grant cycle, those will be submitted the old way. You'll email CPA Fiscal and they'll provide the paperwork. You won't submit those on KPAR. A second question that came in is, does between object codes mean between the main categories 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, etc., or between individual object codes like 1,120 to 1,150? Great question. Between object codes means between the categories. So it would be taking from 1,000 and moving it to 2,000 or 4,000, not the subcategories of 1,120, for example.
Those are great questions. Is there another one, or should we move on?
Those are the two that are related to budget revisions right now. So I think we can keep on going. One did come in also about the slide, just to reiterate. If you're attending this webinar, we will send out an email that has the recording and the slides as well within the next few days, hopefully no longer than a week, because it will take us a little time to get everything ready, but we will be sending them out to anyone that's attended. You don't need to email us separately because you registered. We have your contact information.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on then. So let's dive into the actual tool and walk through the steps of how to submit a budget revision. So the very first thing you'll do, just like you did with your proposed budget, is sign into KPAR. You'll select the 2023-24 school year and your academy. The reason you're selecting the 23-24 school year is because your grant allocation, your funding is based on your KPAR report from the previous school year. Once you're logged into KPAR, you'll see this Academy sections menu, and you want to scroll down to Budget Builder. So just like you did for your proposed budget, click Budget Builder. And that will take you inside of your budget. At the top of your budget, you will see your industry sector, the funding year, your allocation, all this information. You want to make sure that your budget status is certified. And certified simply means that your proposed budget was approved by all the people that were in line to approve it. So that would include your coordinator, the CPA consultant, the CPA analyst, your principal approved it, and then the district financial officer. So it went through the whole chain and the budget is certified. If your budget is not certified, then you're unable to do a budget revision. So I would recommend, and in the near future, just signing in and taking a look at this and just see what is the status of your budget right now. All right, so assuming that your budget is certified, you would then see a button at the top of the budget that says Start Budget Revision. You would click the Start Budget Revision button. And you'll see some instructions that walk you through how to revise a budget. So the first step is if you need to add a new line item, so say you're at your purchasing, or you plan to purchase or have purchased a different item, you want to add a new line item. You also need to edit the narrative as well as the cost directly in the text boxes. So you will see text boxes that you can interact with, and you do need to edit both of them. Once you've gone through all the edits and you've updated your budget, then at the bottom of the screen, you will see the submission button. And once you submit your revisions, all of your revisions will appear highlighted in yellow. And that's how you know that you were successful. You don't need to memorize all these steps. So what I just showed you is also at the top of your budget. So you'll see the information about when a budget revision is required. You'll see the example and the three steps of how to revise a line item. It's also really important to note that only items that are funded by your CPA grant funds can be revised. Notice that these last two columns, district and business match, these will be frozen in your budget and they cannot be revised. So revisions are only being made to CPA grant funds. We're just working with this third to last column. And again, the way you'll know that you can interact with it is because any line items that use CPA grant funds will have an active text box for both the narrative and the funding amount. And another key tip to keep in mind is before you even begin this process, identify your total CPA grant allocations. So again, at the top of your budget screen, look, find your allocation. Possibly you're fully funded at 81,000, maybe it's less than that. And then calculate 20% of that allocation. So in this case, 20% of 81,000 is $16,200. So this is the amount that I'm working with. And for any revisions, I need to ensure that at least this amount is available to move out of a single object code. So just to be really clear, 20% of my total is $16,200 in this case. And I need to look at a single object code, the 1000s or the 4000s. And if I don't have at least this amount in there to move out into another object code or to multiple object codes, then I will not be doing a budget revision. All right.
Cameron, there's been just 3 questions that have come in that are relevant to
Let's pause right here.
now. Janice asked, can I move from object code 3000 to 1000? The answer is yes. Just keep in mind, both of those are within the personnel. So anything that's going to touch your 1000, 2000, and 3000, you'll want to just make sure that you're not exceeding that 40% threshold. But yes, you can move between object codes. Another person asked about the status of their budget. So if your status is not certified, that means that it either is waiting to be approved by CDE or principal or your district financial officer. That's the order. So if you're if it says approved by principal, that means that we're still waiting for your district financial officer to do the final approval. And if it says it's been approved by CDE, that means that we're waiting for your principal to sign next. So the order is CDE, principal, district financial officer. And that should help you know who to get in touch with. We have sent multiple reminders out to people and we'll continue reminding them. But just so you know who you can reach out to directly to get your budget certified.
Those are great questions. Any others before I move on?
Somebody asked in the example, the revision amount was not over 20% of the budget. Do you still need to do small budget revisions? The answer is no. If the amount that you are moving does not exceed 20%, then you'll report those on your end of project report. You don't submit a budget revision for those. And I think that covers it for right now. Go ahead and continue.
Great questions, everyone. Thank you. Keep them coming. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into an example, a concrete example of a budget revision. And I think through this example, you'll see how hard it is to actually, or how unlikely, I should say, it is that you'll need a budget revision. So let's imagine that we are looking at our budget and we're down in the 4,000s. So we're looking at our books, our supplies, our materials, and we have determined that we need more supplies for our CPA. In fact, we need $16,310.20 that we've identified for some additional purchases we want to make. So this is the amount of money that we want to spend on additional supplies. We originally budgeted, if we look here at the totals that we had originally budgeted for our supplies, we were counting on spending just under $20,000. Okay, so I want to spend another $16,300 and some change. Okay, but the first thing I need to think about is, okay, where in my budget, in what other object code am I able, or multiple codes, right? Where in my budget can I transfer $16,310.20 into object code 4000 so that I can purchase these supplies? So where does this money already exist in my budget, and where do I have flexibility to move it from? So if the funding that you need for these supplies is transferred from multiple object codes, so maybe I grab some money from the 1000s, some from the 3000s, and some from the 5000s. So I'm grabbing from multiple object codes and moving it into the object code 4000. And each transfer is less than or equal to 20% of my total grant allocation. In this case, less than or equal to 20% of $81,000, then I don't need a budget revision. I don't need a budget revision. It's less than or equal to 20% that I'm pulling from these other object codes. All right. If, however, funding is being transferred from a single object code, so I'm pulling from my 5000s only, I'm transferring money from my 5000s into my 4000s to purchase these items, and that amount that I'm transferring exceeds 20% of the total $81,000 allocation, or whatever my allocation is, then yes, I do need a budget revision. Let that sink in for a second. Okay. So here we're now looking at the 1000s of my budget. Scrolled up to the top of my budget, I'm in the 1000s, and I want to see what I have available and what I can work with. So here I have money allotted for extra duty for teachers, about $3,200. My co-coordinator is getting paid for extra duty hours for advisories and meetings. I've got almost $6,000 going to my co-coordinator. And then I've got 0.1 FTE for CPA teachers, right? For pull-out meetings, PLC meetings, all these good things we do, and just over $10,000. In quick math, 10,000 plus 6,000 plus 3. Okay, I have definitely enough money here to fund my supplies that I wanted to purchase in the 4,000s. Okay, transferring the full $16,310.20 for my supplies from object code 1000 to 4000 would require a budget revision in this case, because this amount exceeds 20% of my total allocation, which in this example is $81,000. So yes, we can move forward with a budget revision in this example. So step 2, I would then edit the narrative, which is this big column here. Any text boxes, I would edit the narrative, as well as the dollar amounts in the editable text boxes to reflect the updates by budgeting. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and instead of spending 55 extra duty hours on my 3 core teachers to process field trip forms and manage interventions, guess what? We're cutting that down to 15 hours and 1 core teacher. So I have now subtracted $2,373 from line item 4. Line 9, my co-coordinator that I funded, that I was paying to for all of their help with ordering supplies, holding meetings, grant reporting outside of school today. Guess what? This position has been cut. So I now have almost $6,000 back to move elsewhere. And the 0.1 FTE for my CPA teachers, right, to plan, complete reports, budgeting, etc. We're going to move that to a 0.5. And so I've now reduced that expense by 50%, and I now have $5,067. Again, this is an example that is very unlikely. It's very unlikely that you're going to be cutting all of the important funding for the people that do the work, but I just want to give you an example of how this would work. So if I add these up, I've got $13,373.60. I'm still shy of that $16,300 or so that I need for my supplies. We'll keep looking through our 1000s to see where else we have some money. Okay, looks like in line 3, I was going to pay 20 hours at almost $60 an hour for a coordinator outside of the school day to plan internships and mentorships and things like that. But guess what? That teacher, that coordinator is going to go ahead and do this during contracted hours. So we're going to move that money, take back the $1,186 we had allotted for that, And I had planned on having subs I could chaperone some field trips. Guess what? We don't need subs. So I took back $1,750. And now I have that $16,310.20 that I need to purchase my supplies. Again, noticing that all of this money came from the 1,000. Okay, so my next step would be, once I've edited the narrative and the dollar amount for each of these items, would be to scroll to the bottom of the budget and click Save Budget Revision. And I can see now in this orange, this gold line, that I am now under budgeted by the amount that I want for my supplies. I'm under budgeted because I haven't yet reallotted this amount into the 4,000s. I haven't transferred it in. So it's showing me under budget. And so my next step would be to move that money into the 4,000s. If you notice over here, we're scrolling down in our budget, we're in the 4,000s. And now I can go ahead and move those funds into whatever line items I need to. So here I had said I was going to purchase 4 hot plates for my chem classes. I need 10 of them. And so I've moved from about $2,000 up to $5,400, added $3,248 to this line item. I ended up needing to double the number of supplies for my medical assisting classes because I have increased enrollment. And so I've doubled the amount of money I'm spending on these supplies. I've gone from $7,000 up to $14,323. That's a difference of $7,161. And I also found that I needed, more supplemental supplies for my core and CTE classes, for lesson materials, consumables. So I changed my narrative. I said just increase number of supplemental supplies, and I added $5,899 to this line to come up with $16,363 spent on these supplemental supplies. Notice that I have edited the narrative and the dollar amount text boxes for each of these. And if I sum it all up, I have that $16,310.20 now transferred into the 4,000s from the 1,000s. And if I did my math right, it'll all balance out here on this gold line. I can see that $81,000 that's allotted to me through my CPA grant funds is in fact going up here. And a button at the bottom of my budget will show up that says Submit Budget Revision. If this number were miscalculated, I would not see the Submit Budget Revision button. And ta-da! All the revisions are now going to show up highlighted in yellow throughout my budget. And this is the final view that you would see. Obviously, I could scroll down a lot more, but there's not enough room on the screen here. But you will see all the line items that you edited highlighted in yellow. And that is how you would submit a budget revision. I do want to take a pause here. I'm sure there's lots of questions. So Elise, has anything come through?
We have actually been able to, none so far since we've started this most recent process. So if you do have any questions about how to submit it, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we'll keep on answering.
Okay. Well, hopefully things are making sense, or else I put you to sleep. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. Okay, let's keep moving. So this is how we submit a revised budget. There are some common, I would say, obstacles, maybe some common challenges. I want to walk through some scenarios that you might see as you try to do this process or work through this process. All right, so at the bottom of your budget, you will sometimes see a bolded red section. These are submission alerts. So one type of submission alert that you might come across is regarding your updated narratives and cost. So if both the narrative and the dollar amount are not updated in those editable text boxes, then you will see an alert at the bottom of the budget that says, this budget revision cannot be submitted for the following reason. All budget revisions must have updated narratives. So just go back up, you'd have to figure out where did you not update both this box and this box. In this example, we can see I changed the dollar amount to $0, but I did not explain why I changed my total amount to $0. Another type of submission alert is regarding your indirect cost. This always shows up at the bottom of the budget. So if the budget revision causes the indirect amount to exceed the approved LEA percentage, then you will receive this alert to adjust the indirect cost. And it'll probably say the indirect cost may not exceed the approved LEA percentage of, and then whatever your percentage is in your district. I'll slow down just a little bit. Another type of alert shows up in the actual total row. So we talked about this earlier, this golden row here. If after you press Save Budget Revision, you see this notice, this is telling you if you are over or under budget. So in this case, it says over budgeted by $4,284.30. So I need to figure out how to adjust that. And this happens, it's easy to do a miscalculation. So you have to go back and check your math. We had a question related to this earlier. So another one is exceeding the personnel limit. If after pressing Save Budget Revision, you see this notification, this is about the total for object codes 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, which is all for personnel, benefits, and things like that. If that exceeds 40% of the total budget, then you'll see this notification letting you know that you cannot exceed 40% with the 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 combined. And then one final notification you might see is regarding when you try to transfer 20% or less of your total CPA grant funds. So if you're transferring 20% or less from one single object code, then a notification will confirm that a budget revision is not required. And that button at the bottom for you to submit your budget revision will not even appear on the screen. And going back to the beginning, that's why it's important before you even start this process to figure out what is 20% of your total allocation and look through your object codes to see where do you even have that amount of money. You can save yourself a lot of time if you start with that step. And then just a few other common challenges. I think a lot of us, as I was building this, I experienced KPAR timing out on me quite a few times. So, just keep in mind that if you're idle in KPAR, if you haven't, saved as you've gone along, KPAR can time out and kick you out into the sign-in page, which I know can be really frustrating if you spend a lot of time making a lot of edits to your text. So that leads me to the second one, unsaved changes. I recommend pressing Save Budget Revision after every single line item that you edit, and that way your work is saved. And if for some reason you get booted out of the system and you sign back in, your revisions will be saved, your edits will be saved. Another common issue is just, not moving more than 20% from one single object code. So maybe you moved it from, you move money from multiple object codes to purchase some different things, but not a single one of those object codes brought you up to more than 20% of your total allocation. And so at this point, you're not going to see an option to submit a budget revision. We just talked about exceeding the 40% cap for object codes 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 combined. So if you exceed that, you'll run into an issue. Those budget miscalculations, super easy to make, but those will appear at the bottom of the screen if you've miscalculated. Again, not updating both text boxes, the narrative and the budget dollar amount. And then lastly, this is maybe the easiest one, is simply forgetting to press Submit Budget Revision at the end. So there's two buttons, there's Save Budget Revision and there's Submit Budget Revision. Save is just saving your edits as you go. When you're completely ready to submit the whole revision, you'll need to press that button at the end. Okay, I'm going to pause again for a moment and see if there's some more questions. Elise?
A few have come up. So the first one was, who can I contact if I have questions while working on the grant? So we'll put up our email addresses again. It depends on your type of question. If it's CPA, if it's a fiscal question, we have our CPA fiscal email and team. If it's a program question, such as about cohorting or allowable activities, that would be our CPA Academies team. And if it's specifically about KPAR, you need access to log into the system, something isn't saving correctly, or you want to know how to use the portal better, that's our KPAR email at the bottom there. I know it's 3 emails, can be a lot to cover, but you should get a more efficient, quicker answer if you email the inbox that is connected to your question. Sarah asked, just to confirm, you do not need a budget revision if the money was moved from different codes, as long as it is less than 20% per code versus total amount throughout all the codes. Yes, that is correct. If you're moving funds, if you're moving funds that is 20% or less of your total allocation, it does not require a budget revision, an official budget revision that Kind just walked us through.
Anything else, Elise, right now?
Nope, not at the moment. You want to keep going?
Okay, let's go back a slide. Well, we made it through. We made it through, and I know it was a lot of information. It's a lot to process. I want to share with you that we do have some upcoming information sessions and webinars. The most recent, or I guess the soonest one coming up is at Educating for Careers, which is the first few days of March. We'll be presenting a session on the CPA budget and expenditure report that you'll be doing in KPAR. And this is Sunday, March 2nd, which is the first day of EFC from 10:30 to 11:45. I'd love to see some of you in person there. And then we'll also be offering a handful of webinars in the spring covering 2 different topics. So we have the KPAR annual report. Again, this reporting platform will open for you on April 1st. So we want to support you with a webinar in April, and then another one again in June to help walk you through this process. And then we'll also be offering an end of project expenditure report, both in May and August. We'll send those specific dates out once they're set. But the EOP expenditure report is due August 29th. And so we'll be supporting you with that process starting in May, and then another one in August before it's due. So mark your calendars. I'll leave this here for a moment. We send out reminders about these upcoming webinars and conferences through our listserv. If you're not getting those messages for some reason, please email us and we'll make sure that you are in our listserv. And then we also send out a monthly newsletter. And so this information is in that newsletter also. Okay, so I do want to open it up to more questions and answers. So I'll turn things over to our analysts to see if anything else has come through.
Hi, it's Alicia. We have one. Okay, if we don't spend exactly to the dollar in each section, do we need to move money around on our budget builder, or do we leave it as is? Like, let's say our projected field trip would cost $5,000 and it ended up being $4,500. We don't request a budget revision, but do we need to move that money around on our budget builder?
That's a good question. So you would not require a budget revision in that example because that amount is not over 20% of your total allocated amount. You would simply on your end of project expenditure report on the concrete amounts that you actually spent throughout the year. Thank you, Alicia. Any others out there, Michelle, or Cindy, any questions?
Yes, there is one, LAUSD Prop 98 schools have not, so this is have not received their funds as of yet. Books close in April for LAUSD. Will we have an extension? Should we expect to receive funds in the spring semester of each year? If so, how do we handle expenses in the fall since there is no longer carryover?
Yeah, so that's a great question to be sent out to CPA Fiscal. It sounds like it's a Prop 98 question also, and Michelle handles Prop 98. So absolutely reach out through this email here, CPA Fiscal, and we will get you an answer to that question. Any other Q&A related to the budget revision process?
I see a question that came in that said budget revision for last year's amount need to be emailed to CPA Fiscal. Yes, so if it came from your 23-25 grant, those still need to be emailed. We'll handle those the old way. You'll submit a short form because that grant is not accounted for in our KPAR system. So this is only for the 24-25 grant that you recently submitted a budget for and moving forward.
Yes, we're moving towards trying to make everything digital and streamlining the processes. So we're getting there. Keep the questions coming. We're here to answer your questions and support you. So
They want to know, will we be able to view the recording later?
yes, so we are recording this webinar and we will be sharing the recording with you. We'll let you know what that format is, whether it's sending it to you through our listserv or posting it to our website. We'll get those details, but this will be available, yes. As will the slides. We just have to make sure the slides are 508 compliant. That takes a little bit of time to get all of the slides through that process. So once that's ready, we'll have these posted as well.
Okay, and then Joe asked, how do we deal with rollover?
How do we deal with rollover?
I can hop in on that one. So this will be the last year that rollover, if you will. So the funds, we used to have a 2-year grant. So this will be the last year that this will be concluding the last time that we're doing a 2-year grant. So any funds that you have that rolled over, Joe, from 23-24 and they're ending this year, the grant period for those is ending on June 30th, 2025. So those will need to be encumbered or spent by then. And then also, so that's handling rollover, which I believe you're talking about the 23-25 previous grant.
These are great questions.
So this is Cindy Rose. Someone is asking, oh, maybe somebody answered it. Somebody's asking, how would the signatures be collected in digital submission of the EOPs? So the paper one would be signed, wet signed, and then the EOP will be having a webinar on how it's similar to the budget builder. It will be digitally submitted, the 1-year grant. And then somebody wants to be set up with a meeting with LAUSD.
Yes, please email us directly through one of these emails, whichever one you think is most related, and we'll get back to you about setting up a meeting.
I'm not sure what large amount.
And we're happy to see them. We're here for another 15 minutes until 4:45. So if you want to stay and ask more questions, feel free.
Can you repeat the order of approvers again?
Yes, so after the CPA coordinator submits the proposed budget, it comes through to us here at CDE. One of the consultants, so either Elise or I, would then look it over and approve it. And then it would go through to the corresponding analyst, so either Cindy, Michelle, or Alicia would then look it over and approve it. At that point, it goes to your principal for review and approval, and lastly to the district financial officer. If you're not sure who your district financial officer is, as the CPA coordinator, you can also look in KPAR. So in the login screen, there's an option, I believe it's like a manage users option. You should be able to see your contacts for your CPA. And if someone has, if you know that someone has maybe transferred out of that position or there's someone new in that role, you can email us at the KPAR email, and we can update their contact information and send them their login information so that they can log into KPAR and approve the budget. I'm going to go ahead and it sounds like the questions are winding down. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but anyone that also wants to stay on, please feel free. We're here to answer questions for about another 15 minutes. But I just want to thank, oh, is there another one? Do you want to answer real quick?
Just one. The qualifying students in the last KPAR is for both grants, and the answer is yes. Your 23-24 grant informed your final payment for your 23-25, and then it also informed your funding for 24-25 as well.
That's great. Anything else before I stop the recording? We're still here. We're not going
No
anywhere.
questions so far.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much for your time this afternoon. We hope this was informative, and we hope that it walked you through the process clearly. But of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, and we will get these resources out to the field and available as soon as possible. Again, you know, there's still a good window of time to do this, so we'll get these to you as soon as we can, and we hope you have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.